The Arizona sun was sinking low, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. The air was still, except for the creak of saddle leather and the slow steps of a tired horse. Eli Turner, a rancher in his 40s, rode alone toward home after checking his cattle near the foothills. He was used to silence, the kind of quiet that came from years of solitude. His wife had died 5 winters ago, and since then, Eli had lived with little more than his horse, his land, and his ghosts. As he passed an old cottonwood tree by the dry riverbed, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement, or maybe just the wind. He slowed his horse. The air suddenly felt heavy. Then he saw it. Hanging from one of the thick branches was a small figure, limp, swaying slightly. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He jumped off his horse and ran forward. It was a young girl, maybe 16, her wrists tied with rough rope, her head hanging to one side. Around her neck, a crude wooden sign swung in the faint breeze. The words were burned into the wood. "White man don't forgive." Eli froze, staring at the message. His stomach twisted. He had seen hate before, on both sides, but this was something darker. Whoever had done this hadn't just wanted to kill, they wanted to send a warning. He reached up quickly, cutting the rope with his knife. The girl's body fell into his arms. To his shock, she gasped, faintly, but alive. "Easy now," he whispered, lowering her gently to the ground. Her lips were dry, her skin cold. He poured water from his canteen into her mouth. She coughed, barely breathing, her eyes fluttering open just long enough for him to see their deep, dark color, eyes that still held fight. "Don't leave me," she murmured weakly. "You're safe," Eli said softly. "I've got you now." He checked her pulse, faint but steady. Someone had beaten her badly. He could see bruises, a split lip, dried blood on her hands. Anger rose inside him like fire. He didn't care who she was, Apache or not, no one deserved this. Carefully, he wrapped her in his coat and carried her to his horse. "Hang on, little one," he muttered as he lifted her onto the saddle. "We're getting you home." The ride back was slow. The desert night crept in, cold and quiet. Eli could feel her shallow breaths against his chest as he rode. Above them, the stars began to appear, distant and indifferent to the cruelty below. When he reached his ranch, he carried her inside, laid her on his bed, and lit the lantern. The sign he had taken from the tree lay on the table, its words glaring at him in the flickering light. Eli stared at it for a long time and muttered to himself. Whoever did this, they just started something they'll wish they hadn't. Outside, the wind howled softly through the empty desert, carrying with it the whisper of vengeance, and the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. The night settled heavy over the Turner Ranch, the kind of silence that only the desert knows, deep, wide, and endless. The sound of crackling firewood filled the small wooden cabin where Eli Turner sat beside the bed. The young Apache girl lay motionless, her breathing shallow but steady. Her wrists were wrapped in clean cloth, and the bruises on her face had begun to fade under the warm glow of the lantern. Eli leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on her. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. Every few hours he checked her pulse, changed her bandages, or tried to coax her to drink a little water. She'd said nothing since he brought her home, only mumbled in her sleep, words he couldn't understand, the soft rhythm of her native tongue. As dawn approached, Eli poured water into a tin cup and turned toward her, only to find her eyes open, dark and alert. She stared at him for a long moment, tense as a wild animal. "It's all right," Eli said quietly. "You're safe now." Her lips trembled. Where am I?" "My ranch. About 20 miles east of the San Pedro River." She tried to sit up, but pain stopped her. You're a white man." Eli gave a faint smile. "Last I checked." Her gaze dropped to her bound wrists, where the rope burns were still raw. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. "Didn't seem right to leave a girl hanging from a tree," he said simply. She looked at him, confusion flickering across her bruised face, as if kindness was harder to believe than cruelty. After a moment, she whispered, "My name is Tala. It means, wolf." "Fitting name," Eli replied. "You've got some fight in you, wolf girl." A faint smile touched her lips, then vanished. "They killed my father," she said, voice shaking. "Men came to our village, not soldiers but wearing army coats. They burned our homes. My mother ran with the children. I tried to stop them. They beat me and left me, with that sign." Eli's jaw tightened. "Outlaws," he muttered, using the war as an excuse. Tala turned her face away. They said the white man doesn't forgive. That your kind takes blood for blood. Eli sighed, staring into the fire. Some do. But not all. For a while, neither spoke. The flames danced in the silence between them. Then Eli said, "You should rest. You'll need your strength." Tala hesitated. "They'll come again," she warned. "They'll look for me, and for you." "I know," Eli said, his voice calm, steady. "Let him come." Outside, the wind swept across the empty land, whispering through the fences. The ranch that had once been Eli's quiet refuge was now something else, a line drawn in the sand. He looked at Tala, lying pale but alive in his bed, and he knew he couldn't turn away now. For the first time in years, Eli Turner had someone, worth fighting for. The days passed slowly on the Turner ranch. The snow on the hills melted into muddy streams, and the desert wind grew warm again. Tala was healing, her bruises fading, her strength returning. She helped Eli with chores, moving quietly but with purpose, feeding the horses, mending fences, grinding corn by the window. Sometimes she sang softly in her language, and though Eli didn't understand the words, the sound carried peace into the lonely house. But the peace didn't last long. One morning, Eli found an arrow buried deep in his barn door. Its shaft was painted red, the same color as the words burned into the wooden sign he'd taken from the cottonwood tree, "White man don't forgive." His gut tightened. Someone had found them. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesa, Eli cleaned his rifle and checked every door and window. Tala noticed his silence. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," he said, loading bullets with steady hands. "And I aim to make sure they don't hurt you again." She frowned. "You can't fight them alone." Eli looked at her and smiled faintly. "You planning to help me?" She nodded without hesitation. "My father taught me how to shoot before he died." That night, the ranch fell under a heavy stillness. The moon hid behind clouds, and only the wind moved, whispering through the grass like a warning. Eli placed his rifle on the windowsill, while Tala crouched near the door with a small revolver. Her hands were steady. Then, in the distance, came the sound of hooves. Eli's muscles tensed. "Stay low," he murmured. Shadows emerged from the dark, 4, maybe 5 riders, their faces covered with scarves. The leader carried a torch, its flame dancing against the black sky. He shouted something Eli couldn't make out, but his tone was filled with hatred. The first gunshot broke the night. The bullet shattered a lantern, and the cabin erupted in orange light. Eli fired back, hitting one rider squarely in the shoulder. The man fell, screaming. Tala ducked behind a crate, then leaned out and shot at another attacker, her aim sharp and fierce. The revolver kicked hard in her hand, but she didn't flinch. Bullets ripped through the walls, splinters flying everywhere. The air smelled of smoke and gunpowder. Eli reloaded, shouting, "They're trying to burn us out." Tala grabbed a bucket of water and threw it over the fire spreading along the wall. Flames hissed, dying down. Eli moved beside her, firing again, his face set in grim determination. Finally, after what felt like hours, the gunfire stopped. The riders retreated into the darkness, leaving behind silence, and the faint trail of blood across the sand. Eli lowered his rifle, breathing hard. "You all right?" Tala nodded, her eyes fierce. "I told you I could fight." He smiled wearily. "Yeah, you sure can." Outside, smoke curled into the night sky. The danger wasn't over, but in that moment, they had won. And for the first time, Eli realized this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for redemption, and for something neither of them thought they'd ever find again: trust. The morning after the gunfight came quietly. Smoke still rose from the burnt fence posts, and the air smelled of ash and blood. Eli Turner stood outside his cabin, the rifle still slung over his shoulder, his body aching from the night's battle. The desert stretched silent before him, no riders, no movement, only the wide emptiness of Arizona under a pale sky. Behind him, Tala stepped out slowly. Her hair was loose, her clothes torn, but her eyes were steady. She looked at the damage, the bullet holes in the walls, the broken glass, the bloodstains near the gate, and then at Eli. "They'll come back," she said softly. Eli shook his head. "Not these men. They've had their fill of fight." She hesitated. "You risked your life for me." He turned toward her. "You risked yours for me, too. Guess that makes us even." Tala smiled faintly, but there was sorrow behind it. "Even? No, cowboy. My people say life always asks for one thing more: forgiveness." Her words lingered in the air. Eli stared at the horizon where the sun was slowly rising, painting the desert gold. He remembered the sign that had started it all, "White man don't forgive," and the hate carved into every letter. He had kept that sign, unable to throw it away. Now, he walked to his barn and fetched it from where it leaned against the wall. The wood was rough, the letters darkened by smoke. Tala followed him, silent. Eli placed the sign on the ground and stared at it for a long moment. Then he picked up his knife and began to carve. His hands were steady, his movements slow and sure. The sound of the blade scraping wood echoed softly through the still air. When he was done, the message had changed. The old words were crossed out, replaced by new ones burned deep into the grain. Forgiveness lives. Eli looked at Tala and nodded. There. That's better. She smiled, her eyes glistening. My father would have liked you, she said. He chuckled quietly. Not sure about that. Most fathers don't like ranchers with too much dust on their boots. Maybe not, she said, but he believed some white men carried light, not hate. Together they placed the sign near the cottonwood tree, the same place where Eli had first found her hanging and half dead. Now, instead of pain, the place held peace. The desert wind stirred the feathers of her hair as the new sign swayed gently in the breeze. Weeks turned into months. Tala stayed, and the ranch began to bloom again, fences mended, fields green with life. She taught Eli her words. He taught her how to ride better. In time, laughter returned to the lonely ranch, soft and genuine. Sometimes travelers passing by would see the sign nailed to the tree and ask Eli what it meant. He'd just smile and say, "It means even the hardest hearts can change." And when the sun set behind the Arizona hills, Eli would look at Tala, the girl who'd once been a symbol of vengeance but had become the keeper of forgiveness, and thank the desert for giving him back something he thought he'd lost forever.